There is a lot of cool stuff in here, and it's very informative. Very well done. Unfortunately, not much about UFOs or aliens. Probably the most relevant thing I've seen is right here. What are active galaxies? When I say active galaxies are galaxies with lots of aliens in them. Maybe I should put a note to that effect.
This is what I don't get yet.
So this is about the sun and star formation. This is a movie about the Crab Nebula. And this may be the mother lode because it's an exhibit about life and whether other life exists in the universe. And that is a guide or curator of whom we can ask some questions.
Yeah.
Hi.
So, hi. Hey, good. Thank you. Good questions.
So I'm here for World UFO Day.
Ah, World UFO
Yeah.
Days, and I love that.
Awesome. And this is all about extraterrestrial life. And
Well, it's about the possibility of it because there is no guarantee there is extraterrestrial life.
I disagree.
You know, what I say to visitors, okay, and I love that we still live in a world where we can have our opinions, right? And that may change, but I don't know. But right now, as a scientist, one of the things I remind visitors is that every other human endeavor, whether it's writing symphonies or choosing the flavor ice cream you like, is your prerogative, right? You can believe it, and thank God you have the liberty to do that, right? One thing about science that makes it different is you need evidence. The one human activity that says, show me.
What would you say if I told you I was abducted by an alien and probed and lived to tell the tale?
I would say that you join a growing narrative of people who do claim that. I won't deny that people have claimed that. I mean,
Jimmy Carter says he was
I've never heard him
abducted.
say that. I've never heard him say that. But I've heard, you know, Eric Daniken and people, you know, Twilight of the Gods and Vasilikov and these people and what's his name who made a big, he made a lot of money on the books he wrote, and he actually seemed to have codified what happens to people, all about the probes and the this and what aliens look like. But I remain a scientific skeptic. If an alien is in front of me, I will believe it. If I just hear it from somebody, will remain skeptical because I know as a scientist how difficult it is to travel in space. Now, unless we know, when we don't know all the laws of physics, and I'm sure that in order to travel interstellar distances and whatnot, there would have to be a completely different kind of physics that we have no idea about, and certainly do not have the capability to create that technology. And I don't believe that it would be like instant teleportation or anything like that, because that only happens maybe in quantum physics. What I do show people here is the possibility of life as we understand it. And that is simply water-based. Doesn't even have to be carbon-based. It could be anything else that forms multiple...
Silicon.
Could be. Anything in that column that forms multiple attachment points, right? Mm-hmm. But I would like to see it. We haven't even seen anything in our solar system. And we know that there are some places which have a better possibility of harboring life, like some of the moons of Jupiter, some of the moons of Saturn. They're even talking about subsurface oceans on Pluto. I mean, you know, we're discovering more and more about the solar system. But, and here's the big but, what governs the universe are these laws called physics. They govern the chemistry of life, they cover the biology of life, the laws of physics, right? And right now, as we know them, this is the only place that seems to have made that transition from physics to chemistry to biology. Until we get samples from another place. I'm not saying we won't. And I am a big fan of finding extraterrestrial life. I would hate to think, as Arthur C. Clarke quoted, he said, the universe is either teeming with intelligence or we are alone. Either thought is frightening. Or Fermi says, so where are they? The Fermi paradox. You know all about that stuff, and I'm a student of all of that.
You know about the Drake equation?
I know about the Drake equation, which in 1960, Frank Drake makes this equation where most of those variables were unknown. The only thing in the Drake equation that is improved was the number of planets, because before 1992, we had no confirmation of planets around other stars. Today, due to Kepler, Corot, these kind of, and also now ground-based telescopes, we know of about 3,500 confirmed exoplanets with another 5,000 waiting, and we probably think with good surety that there are trillions of planets in the galaxy alone, more than grains of sand on every beach on Earth. I am a believer in that because I see the proof, okay? Whether or not they're habitable or inhabited remains to be seen. And here is the big problem, and I say that to visitors looking at this. We don't know how life began on Earth. Now, there are theories about it, right? I mean, we can go all from, you getting all of this? Good. We can get panspermia, but that just moves the question also, how did that begin? Where did that happen? We can think of accident. We could think of divine creation. We could think of extraterrestrial intervention, a la 2001 or something. Who knows? But we don't know how life began here. We know approximately when. There are two good thoughts. Where? Either shallow tidal pools or deep sea thermal vents. Why not? But we don't know what happened in that moment when the non-living became living.
What about that experiment from 53?
The Miller-Urey experiment. So what happened was, Miller and Urey are two chemists who create something like this in a controlled environment. They put in what they think were the primordial ingredients of the Earth a couple of billion years ago. They send electricity through it because they think maybe lightning was a catalyst. And what happened? They didn't create life. They created some more complex proteins.
Amino acids, right?
An amino acid, but it wasn't alive. That period that we define as life had to have the beginning of RNA and DNA replication. They didn't do it. And we don't know how that happened. Now, there's
alien seeds?
There's a great science fiction book called The Seedling Stars by, I forgot the guy's name, but they're all short stories about the mission of this group on Earth. They go out to planets and they create life that would be perfectly fit for that environment. So the story is, and this is a great story also, called Surface Tension. It's James Blish, by the way, is the author. They crash on a world that's mainly water. And it goes around the great star Altair. And the world is called Hydra, and they know they're going to die. So they take their seed banks, it's science fiction, and they create, what's the best kind of life to create? Microscopic people. And they put them in the water. And then they die, and then the point of view is from these microscopic people. And you see they make friends in the rotifers and the parameciums and this is this microscopic life. And one of these people, by accident, winds up on a thermocline and he breaks the surface tension. And he thinks, oh, there's something else out there. And then he falls back in shock. But he gets the idea, you know what? We're going to conquer space. They build, quote, a spaceship, and it's 2 inches long, this huge ship, and they go, and I'll remember the last lines of the story. They drag it up this thermocline, they break the surface tension, and they go to a neighboring pond. And the last words of the story are, they crossed space, or had they?
Right.
So,
it's a metaphor.
One of the greatest things that is in this universe is the human imagination. Amazing, right? And the human imagination can wonder all kinds of things. The limit of the imagination is the individual, right? But that is not a substitute for real evidence. And I grew up with that, and I would be very happy to know that there is life in the universe. Maybe there is, but...
Have you heard of the gamma ray burst issue?
Sure.
And there's artificial intelligence too. Maybe any civilization sufficiently advanced will destroy itself.
Well, that's one of the warnings and one of the equations. One of the factors in the Drake equation. But again, it's all speculation. There's no law. There's no proof of that. Civilizations, at least human civilizations, have come and gone. But it doesn't mean that we know what the evolution of other, if there are other civilization. We don't know. We don't know. We're basing it all on our own experience, which is rather jingoistic. You know, who knows what other people would do.
What would you do right now?
Yeah.
If I pulled my face off and I was a green alien
like
lizard.
What was that What was that show?
V?
V, yeah. I would say,
Or Men in Black?
either you've proved your point, or you're a great makeup guy and you can work for Hollywood. You know?
I am an alien underneath, but I'm forbidden to reveal myself.
I know. Well, I think there's a movie on Netflix now about a teenager who is an alien but passes as a teenager, as if human teenagers didn't feel alienated enough, you know. So, you know. But you know, I'm an astronomer.
Oh, right
okay?
on.
And I watched the skies, and at one point, I thought I saw a UFO. And I have to remember, you have to remember what that stands for, and it's the U that's important. It is unidentified. And do you know what? Do you know
Exactly.
what the most named object is for UFO sightings? Is the planet Venus.
Oh, right.
Because it's bright, people don't know about it.
Yeah.
You can come across it unexpectedly, as I did, and I have an observatory, and it just kind of caught me one night by surprise. I moved my telescope, I saw this bright thing, I said, yay, they're finally going to say hello to me. And yeah, it was Venus.
Yeah.
So
I have a question.
Sure.
Okay.
yeah.
Did you see that?
Yeah.
That was a UFO?
It's probably a bottle cap.
But can you identify it conclusively?
By the sound of it, I could have, yeah.
But it could be almost anything.
Yeah,
right?
no, I'm not saying, look, UFOs are, but you know, as they say, because you can't identify something doesn't make it something. Remember that. So
Right.
anything that's unidentified is based on the knowledge of the person, the observer. I mean, if I'm an expert about where the planets are, I'll know where Venus is all the time. I will never mistake it for a flying saucer or a ship.
Well, hold on a sec, though. Okay, let's say you see a flying saucer, but you identify your friends from a different planet, Xenu, Bob and Michael are flying. Is it a UFO? It's identified.
Who identifies it?
Well, let's say I do, because I'm an alien lizard. To me, it's
But
not.
that's a
UFO.
lot of ifs, though. You see that? Yeah, those ifs are almost insurmountable. With present knowledge. That's all I could say about that. You know, give me the evidence, and I am a true believer. But without the evidence, it's only speculation. So for some people, it's a hope. For some people, it's a fear. I mean, I know people who would be afraid because they know they take the lesson of H.G. Wells. Look what happens. Look what happens when a greater power lands on the shores of a lesser power. Who loses in that one usually? But then there are people who believe the opposite. There's great benefits to be had by advanced civilization. Who knows?
I know, and you want evidence? I'll be back tomorrow with Xena and Xenu, my friends.
I wish you would, please. Please, I would love to see them.
They might
talk
be
to
busy. They just started dating, and I'll see what I can do.
Thank you so much, really.
Like
You're
fun.
really terrific. I had a lot of fun. Okay.
Me too, thank
you. Bye-bye.
June 30th,
So
apparently.
June 30th, 1908. Tunguska River event. Something you did hear about that.
Yeah.
So something exploded over the forests of Siberia near the Tunguska River Valley. They don't know what it is. Some people think it might have been a comet, an asteroid. My pleasure. And filled, like pickup sticks, like knocked trees down flat, barbecued the deer, knocked people's... Luckily, it didn't happen over a heavily populated area. And that event is now marked by International Asteroid Awareness Day, which is every June 30th, which means, wow, is something going to happen like that over populated areas? And the latest news out of those that monitor the near-Earth objects, the NEOs, says we're pretty good for the next 100 years. Nothing big is like that's going to happen. But sometime in the future, we will have another extinction event. What do we do about it is the big question. So,
Yeah.
well, no, there are engineers who are working on it. There's some very good plans on the drawing board of how to deal with that. They all depend on early detection.
Right, so you can
Always.
nudge it. Yeah. By the way, that could be your proof of alien life. Maybe that explains.
Well, this what they now know was a comet Oumuamua that came from another star system. They thought, it looked like a Star Trek prop, a long thing. First they thought it was an asteroid. Now they believe that it's a comet from the way that it was tumbling and the kind of reflection it was giving off. And you know, people joked about, is this a starship? Is it sending out radio signals? And of course, nothing was picked up. But you know, I mean,
Stealth. It's a stealth ship.
Right. But well, it was visible anyway. You know. Sure.
Right
I mean, you know, maybe they are. You know. I can't say yes and I can't say no.
It is strange that we haven't detected any signals, though. Don't you think?
You know, I think in part we don't know if there is alien civilization. What do they transmit? Is it radio? Is it laser? Is it some other kind of radiation? We don't know.
If they're smart enough, they should. Remember Contact? Did you see Contact?
Yeah.
And I think, what did they do? They had some sort of like binary.
They all do. We sent out on one of the Voyager things. We
Oh,
sent out
yeah.
a binary
In
plate.
70
Carl
something.
Sagan,
Yeah, right.
77.
Yeah.
Carl Sagan helped design that.
Yeah, right.
Some people like Stephen Hawking said we shouldn't have done that.
Dangerous. Tempting fate, right?
You know, he said two things. We should be a star-faring species, but he also said we shouldn't advertise. So he was of two minds with
Be
that.
careful what you wish for.
Yeah, could
Yeah.
be. Who knows? Yeah. So. How old is this? All right, I'm going to answer all your questions. The one question that I can't answer is where did it land? All right. So just be aware, and I'm not holding back anything. All right. Okay. Make sure you touch it. Make sure you touch it. Okay. It is real. All right. So. Yes. So this is from space, and it is the oldest thing that you will ever touch because it is older than the Earth. This piece of iron, and that's why the magnet will stick to it, right? We know that it's made of iron and it's heavy, 15.5 tons. And when you make a planet, where do you think the heaviest stuff winds up? It sinks in the middle. Exactly. Very good. Stay with me, right? So this is from the center of a small planet that was a building block of our solar system, but it was destroyed in a collision almost 5,000 million years ago. That's a 5 with 9 zeros. Now that is old. You know, you think your parents are old, right? You think your grandparents are old. You must also think that dinosaurs are old. No contest. This is old. Almost 5,000 million years old. And you can touch it, and it's real. This is not a model. This is the real thing. Okay? Absolutely the real thing. So please make sure you do touch it. Right? In fact, if you want it, take it home already. I'm tired of it. Wow.
So where did they find it?
Okay, so there was no they. There was one man who found this in the woods outside of Portland, Oregon on a tip. He was a retired miner. So when he found a piece of iron on the surface of the earth, it was actually half buried in the ground, and it didn't show any signs of manufacture. It didn't say made in Ohio or England or whatever it was. He knew that it was extraterrestrial. Because you too, if you find a piece of iron on the ground that shows no sign of manufacture, it means it comes from space because all of Earth's native iron needs to be dug out of the ground. It needs to be mined, all right? So he realized he had found the largest iron meteorite ever to land somewheres in the United States. And he wanted it. He wanted it very badly because he knew how valuable it was. Except the problem was he found this on somebody else's private property. And in the United States, private property is almost sacred. In most other countries of the world, it would automatically belong to the government. Not here. In fact, today, even in today's society, we don't know what happens to meteorite finds, who actually owns them. There have been some court cases about it. So anyway, what would you do if you found something very valuable, no one else knew about it, you wanted it, but it was on somebody else's private property? What would you do?
Buy the property.
Oh, you gave away the story. He did it. He stole it. He actually dragged this 15.5-ton meteorite about 3/4 of a mile, 1.5 kilometers, to his property, where he then announced that he had found it, and he started to sell tickets. Now, I am a big believer in evidence. And anything I say, I want to have proof for it. So here it is. Ellis Hughes, the retired miner, dragging the Willamette meteorite through the woods of Oregon to his property. Now, all he had to do was his stepson, who was 15 years old, looks like a monster, a white horse, and a crude cart that he made out of trees he cut down right in the woods on the trail there, and then he spent the next 90 nights dragging it through the woods, painstakingly. Why at night? because he wanted to keep it a secret. But he forgot that the neighbors grew curious, hearing weird sounds every night, so they would come down to the trail he made with hammers because they wanted souvenirs. And what they did was they cut pieces out with a hammer. They just knocked them right off. You can see all of these rough pieces there were taken by souvenir hunters. So if anybody has a hammer on you, please put it away. So Ellis Hughes doesn't care. He eventually gets this meteorite to his property, and he starts to sell tickets for the public and brags about his acquisition. Now, don't you know who one of his first customers was? A lawyer for the mining company he stole it from. And nobody believes that the universe has justice in it, right? And the guy says, Mr. Hughes, we know that you took this. We don't want any problems. We'll give you some money. Give it back. Ellis Hughes takes out a rifle, and he says, get off my property. This is mine. So the landowner has no recourse but to bring him to court. So for 18 months, there is a circus of a trial where everybody in the neighborhood is claiming they found it and want it. One farmer says, Your Honor, I can prove it's mine. I'll show you the crater. His neighbor says, Your Honor, he's lying. He's lying. We heard him make it with dynamite the other night. And Ellis Hughes hires 2 Native Americans also to undermine the owner's claim by saying it was sacred to their tribe, and they were paid witnesses. So in the end, after 18 months, you know, the judge had it with these shenanigans and gives it to the landowner, who says, what am I going to do with 15.5 tons of iron? If I melt it, how many nails could I make out of that? A lot. Good answer, right? Luckily, as you can see, that never happened because a very wealthy New York socialite named Grace Dodge falls in love with this meteorite at an exposition and buys it from the owner, who wasn't interested in it, for $20,000, which is about the equivalent of $1 million today, and she graciously gives it to the museum as a gift in 1906, where it has been, and it's been sitting on an iron pier that goes 2 stories down to Manhattan bedrock, completely independent of this new building. So that's that. Now that's the history of this, most of it.
Did they move it from somewhere else?
Well, this was originally in 1906. This was in a building where the big canoe is now out there, we call the Grand Gallery, and it was, you know, it was on a different kind of stand. Then it was in the Hayden Planetarium, which was on this footprint, on this thing, and they just built this building around it. Rather than move it and store it, they built the building around it, and they put a box over it to cover it. So my question now is, we know that this is made of iron, and where does that come from? How do you make an iron meteorite?
A lot of heat.
A lot of heat, right? Okay, so let me tell you that out in space there are many factories, millions and billions of factories out there, otherwise known as stars. And the reason we can see them, they make light, and if they're close enough we feel the heat, is that they are doing something really miraculous. They're taking a very simple ingredient like hydrogen, and they're squeezing it in their hearts under extreme heat and pressure, and they're making all of the ingredients that make up the material universe. And eventually, for those of you who remember this in school, having nightmares about this in chemistry, it is all of the ingredients that the universe is made of. What's number 26? 26? Yeah, look at number 26.
Can you read that? Iron?
Iron, right, iron. Now, the reason that iron is special is that once these stars reach iron, and it takes a very big star, our sun is not going to do it, but a big star that makes iron, it is the end of its life, because the laws of nature say you can't squeeze iron, there's not enough energy. And the star literally goes out in a huge explosion called a supernova. That explosion is equivalent to all the energy a galaxy puts out in a day. That's a lot. And it creates all the rest of the ingredients. So after having snuck in that physics lesson to you, I'm going to give you the personal connection. So think about your body, your biology, nutrition, and think about the importance in your blood of iron. In your blood, you have a protein called hemoglobin that helps transport oxygen to all your cells. Without that, you suffer from anemia, not a fun time. The iron in your blood is identical to the iron in this meteorite and comes from the same source, an exploding star. When you touch this, the atoms of iron in your blood have never been as close to the atoms in this meteorite since they were formed almost 5,000 million years ago in an explosion. And I guarantee at this family reunion, no one says anything embarrassing. So I didn't make that up. That is real science. My hero, Carl Sagan, who left us too early, put those nice words together in his Cosmos series by saying that we are all recycled stardust. And that, to me, is the lesson that's most important to take away. So please touch it, say hi to your relative, and remember that you have learned a very profound lesson in that.
Why doesn't it rust?
Okay, why doesn't it rust? All right, so we can look at some of the details now about this. So, iron. When this comes through the atmosphere, when it reaches a certain thickness, the friction heats up the skin of this meteorite for 30 seconds, and this molten iron oxidizes and becomes this dark fusion crust, which acts as an armor plating over it. Also, you can see that when this was liquid, the air rushing over the descending meteorite created all of these ripples and waves called regmaglyphs. That's a great crossword puzzle. When I learned that one, right? And then it is further protected from rust, from water. But what happened to this meteorite, and I have to say, most people can identify this as an extraterrestrial for the wrong reason. They look at it and they say, oh yeah, that looks very familiar. I remember seeing that, because we have an Institute of Higher Learning, otherwise known as Hollywood. And when Hollywood makes a movie about space and they want to put rocks in space, you know invariably they're going to make them look like that, because to me that is really cool looking. That is interesting, but it is impossible. It is scientifically impossible for that to look like that in space, because it took liquid water to do this. This is sitting in the woods in Oregon where it rains every other second. For thousands of years, rainwater mixes with a chemical in the iron and creates sulfuric acid. Now, very dilute, but consistent over a long period of time. The acid rain ate away 4.5 tons, making this beautiful piece of sculpture, which then Hollywood loves so much that they kidnap that image and they make all their movies with rocks in space look like that. If you want to see what this really looks like in space, you just have to take a very short trip to the backside of the meteorite, and you'll see the part that was buried in the earth, protected from the rain, and retained its original appearance. We have in our hall of meteorites a meteorite, an iron meteorite that's twice as massive as this one, that was taken out of northern Greenland by the American polar explorer Robert Peary in the 1890s. He spent 4 years dragging that 34-ton baby out and bringing it here, but it looks like, you know, it doesn't look like this. So the curators were afraid that the public wouldn't accept it as authentic. So what did they do? They fell under the spell of Hollywood and they painted it red. Now you will not have to see that, because we learned the error of our ways and they cleaned it up. Right? So my warning is, don't learn science from Hollywood. That's right.
Why wasn't it buried deeper?
So you know that game? You know the game we've all played as kids? Kids still play, where you skip stones on water?
Yeah.
So what's the object of the game?
It's the stones to skip and rise up again. And
how do you do that? What's the one control that you have to do that? There's only one control you have. Well, gravity, you can't escape gravity.
The angle.
The angle, good man. The angle that you throw it, right? So imagine one of these coming towards the Earth. Instead of water, it will hit the atmosphere, which acts like a dynamic fluid, and it will skip on it. So if it's coming in at a shallow angle, every time it skips, it loses energy. If it is shallow enough, it might skip back off into space. Now, engineers have to worry about bringing astronauts back, what angle they bring them back into the atmosphere. Because if it's too shallow, they're not coming home. If it's too steep, they're going to burn up. Would you like to see the largest iron meteorite in the world? Now, remember, this is number 6. I can show you number 1. You know those programs where the guy goes like that and you're there? I'm working on it, but I can't do it yet. So I'm going to show you a picture of the largest iron meteorite found to date. Is in a beautiful country called Namibia, Southwest Africa. 60 tons of iron in the original crater. You see that? A farmer plowing his field in 1920 hit something, and they just started to excavate it around there. Now look at the depth of the crater. It's 2 meters or 7 feet. There is an instance of a trajectory, thank you, of a trajectory coming in very shallow. Now, the best preserved impact crater in the world happens to be in the American Southwest in Arizona, Meteor Crater, sometimes known as Barringer Crater. Something about the size of the Hayden Sphere up here, crashed into the Arizona desert 50,000 years ago, but it made a crater 100 times deeper than this. So, what can we deduce about the angle that this one came in?
That one's very close.
Right, straight down vertically. It came in at such a velocity that it vaporized. It blew itself into thousands of small pieces. The man who bought the mining rights to this, thinking he was going to become rich by finding a giant meteorite, Daniel Barringer was a mining engineer, wound up finding this a lot of little pieces. But he was a good guy. What he did was he stuck around and was very influential in convincing the scientific community that many of the craters found on Earth were not volcanic, as was believed, but were impact craters. Nobody believed that before. It was like kind of hiding your head in the sand. Oh, that doesn't exist, you know. And his work led to a great belief that we now have been hit. If you look at the moon, you can see what had happened to the Earth. The difference is that the Earth surface is a very dynamic surface. It's changing constantly. We have plate tectonics, volcanoes, earthquakes, we have erosion, we have human activity, so that a crater doesn't have a real chance to stay too much longer. But if you look at the moon, you can see that we got the same thing. Anyway, if you ever get a chance to go to Namibia, it's a beautiful country anyway. Really, really nice.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure. My pleasure, sure, absolutely.
Awesome.
Cool, right?